Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are, another podcast, and we've got a great guest today and a great name even, shall I say, to start off with. So we've got Dustin Dryden, who's the founder and chairman of Volare Group. I hope I've pronounced that right, Dustin. Is it Volare or Volare?
I think it's open to interpretation, Chris, but I call it Volare. It depends how good your Latin is.
Yeah, or reminiscent of the old Dean Martin songs there. So I think I'll go with Volare. It sounds good, that one. Listen, thank you so much for coming on, and it's great that you're able to give us your time. Now, we know that you're an aviation lover, and I think as everybody who listens, they'll realise that you're a very positive disruptor, and you've got a great track record. But just before we start with the company and your role, how did you get into aviation? What made you want to become like you've been a demo pilot? What made you want to get into aviation in the first place?
Oh, misspent youth, probably, Chris, is generally the answer. But no, I was fortunate enough to grow up in South Africa, and one of the main means of transportation around that part of the world from a very young age was aviation. And so I had the joy from a very young age of flying all over Africa in some very creative older types of airplanes like Viscounts and DC-3s and stuff like that. In the good old days when, as a little boy, you were allowed to sit on the pilot's knee and look out the window in the cockpit. And I think anyone that's experienced that sort of end of the glorious days of aviation, if they get the chance to stay in it, would generally take it. So, my family wasn't in it, but the family used it at the time to commute between South Africa and Zimbabwe, which was my dad's home. And that was probably what caused the interest and the addiction, as it now is.
Fantastic. And whereabouts in South Africa did you end up?
I was born in Cape Town.
I know. Well, I go there every single year, apart from last year with this poxy pandemic. But so I love it down there. You got Milnerton, Camps Bay, and also Arabella. You know where the Lions are staying now.
Yeah, no, and unfortunately, we've not been able to go and watch the Lion tour, which I was planning to do at the moment. But there we go, such is life.
Me too. Still, they're doing well. Hopefully, It'll be 2-0 this weekend. So, touch wood.
Depends which side you're supporting, I suppose, doesn't it, Chris?
Oh, yeah. Even though the accent doesn't give it away, but yeah, yeah, gotcha. Yeah. Well, I'll be thinking of you. Whilst I'm watching it. So, you got in. You became a demo pilot.
Yes, so I entered into aviation at the age of 16 with the joys of the Air Training Corps. Ended up with a bit of help from friends and family, getting into, and a bit of scholarship, getting into a commercial pilot's license. I did a bit of flying in the bush in Africa, and then picked up my first paid job was for flying for Cessnas when they brought out the new single engine Cessnas, which started rebuilding them again, and moved on from there. But it was as a young lad being paid to take people out for lunch in a brand new light aircraft, having flown heaps of junk around the bush in Africa was well, not what my father referred to as a proper job, but it was certainly a very enjoyable job.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. I can only imagine, and like spend a lot of time down there. Some of the sites that you would have seen, it would just be, breathtaking but unique.
Yeah, no, look, it's a wonderful part. I've been very fortunate and flown in most parts of the world, and but flying around Africa is definitely one of the most spectacular countrysides in the world. I was fortunate enough slightly later in my 20s to do my helicopter license down in Cape Town and get into that side of aviation, which is that's my passion and hobby. Helicopters are. But to have flown both around that part of the world has been incredibly enjoyable, and like you, I get down there every year still.
No, fantastic place. So then you moved from flying them to selling them.
Yeah, so a bit of flying, then a bit of flying and selling, and then as the industry started to explode, I took on a Cirrus dealership when they first came out. And was selling those in the UK, and that went fantastically well. That business grew and diversified into larger turboprop aircraft, and I built a management company which started out with a couple of King Airs, and by the time it was sold, I left it in 2015, it had 50 odd aircraft and operated in most continents bar Australia. So it's been a steady migration from little airplanes to big airplanes, and now I run a business called Volare, which you referred to earlier, which specialises in buying and selling airplanes, but also does a bit of management, a bit of charter, and some engineering training. So it basically does every element of aviation.
Brilliant. And also linked into that, you've got My Heli as well.
Correct. Yeah. So as a business, we are predominantly a sales organisation, but in order to support the buying and selling of aircraft, we have the facilities of a helicopter AOC with 109s on it. We have about 14 109s on that at the moment. We have a fixed wing AOC, which is on the 2 Reg in Guernsey. Then we have a 145 maintenance facility, which has nearly every type of business jet on it. And we also have a 147 engineering training school. So between those, we're pretty much able to pick up and run with any type of corporate aviation activity anywhere in the world.
Where's the training school, Dustin?
Training school's based at Oxford. It was originally geared up to assist in developing our own engineers and licensing them. Our business is very unique in what it does. It's a bit like the WeBuyAnyCar.com of aviation. There's probably only one other organisation in the world that does a similar thing to us. We specialise in buying aircraft on the spot, so to speak. So you can send us a maintenance tracking report of the aircraft, some photos, and a basic spec, and we'll make you an offer subject to your description being accurate, and we'll aim to close that transaction within 7 days. So particularly during the pandemic, that's been an interesting opportunity, because it's meant that we are able to hop into one of our aircraft, take a team of engineers to look at something wherever it is in the world, do the deal and fly it home. And there's not many people that have that ability. Once we've picked up the aircraft, wherever it may have been from, we bring it back to our facilities at Oxford. We do heavy maintenance there. Majority of what we do is refurbishment, so paint and interior, any avionics upgrades required to be 2020, and then we put them on the market. And certainly the pandemic has created a very interesting spread in aviation, in that people that had to sell over the last 2 years needed to sell instantly. They needed cash, or they needed to be out for optical reasons, or they just felt that the money in the bank was a safer bet, and that people who wanted to buy tend to be new to aviation. They wanted to buy something that looked right. They recognised, like, their car, was ready to go, doesn't have any big maintenance. And once again, there's very few organisations that can sell you an airplane, you pay your money and fly the next day, it's ready to go with crew. And we've always offered both ends of that scale, and to be able to do it with volume during the pandemic has been extremely good for our business.
That's incredible. So, I mean, like, the pandemic has caused, obviously there's winners and losers in every walk of life and every period of life. But I mean, the spectrum has been immense now with the pandemic. But one of the things that you say there is about being able to review it and buy it and close it within a week. Because one of the traditional things with private aviation is the maintenance records and the amount of paperwork that used to go with it before some of these innovative platforms now, which have got everything online and are a little bit more accurate. But I mean, you could be looking at a whole palette of documentation.
Yeah, so I mean, your average transaction for a private jet would involve a lawyer, probably 2 brokers, a finance director in your company, somebody to survey a maintenance facility, and then somebody to look at the logbooks. And in general, takes usually up to 3 months, and would, in theory, cost the seller between on a $10 million jet anywhere between $200,000 to $400,000 in findings, time, stocking costs, interest, all those sort of stuff. So from a value added to a seller, what we're able to do is turn up with a team of 4 guys. We'll do a fairly intensive visual inspection of the aircraft, which will include borescopes, looking around panels, looking at known areas of corrosion. So not as intensive as ripping it all to bits and a full pre-buy, but it will give you 95% of what you need to know. We'll have 2 guys go through the records, which will usually take us 1 to 2 days. We'll test fly if the aircraft's in airworthy condition, and then we'll complete. And from our perspective and that of the sellers, that is a fairly unique offering. It saves a lot of money, a lot of time, and you don't end up in a position where you have 2 high net worths battling with egos across 5 other sets of lawyers, engineers, and everybody else. It's a clean, quick transaction. We know exactly what we're buying, and we're very transparent. And one of the things that aviation has suffered from so much over the years is lack of transparency.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I think the younger generations, me originally, but not so much anymore, have been successful in this industry, as we've brought the transparency that we've seen in other industries to it. And it's still, aviation's still, in my opinion, one of the most backward industries on the face of the planet. And suffers greatly from not having that transparency and openness that everything else seems to have these days. And hopefully, that gives much more room to disruption. Disruption and transparency in the aviation industry bring the cost point down. And if the cost point comes down, it's open to more people.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. And you're right there, because 3 of the things that I've always been focus on anyhow, and I think even more so now, is our industry and more on the legacy carrier side rather than the private aviation. But it's all about speed, transparency, and quality. And if you tick the boxes of all 3 of those, then you start to look at the pricing element and whether or not somebody's selling a value product or a volume product. So the transparency is so important, and everybody from the regulatory bodies, I ask everybody, collaboration. Everybody says yes, we do. But even when you come to safety statistics and some other key indicators that would help people know where they are, people are reluctant to open up to it. So that big data, or that knowing what's going on, which would be useful to everybody, is still a little bit hesitant. So I think people need to be a lot more confident and open up.
Yeah, there's still a huge volume of people hiding in glass towers of self-importance in our industry. I can't think of another industry that has as many jargon and complexities in it, deliberately put in there to make sure that anybody from the outside can't understand a word of what we're talking about. And I find it immensely frustrating that such a lovely industry, which has so many talented people in it, can be destroyed by literally 1 or 2 people who insist on holding on to processes that are 50 to 60 years out of date, because we've always done it like that. And there's so much room for improvement in infrastructure and every element of the supply chain and authority in this industry, and all of it would improve safety. We slap ourselves on the back as being the benchmark in having taught surgeons how to deal with CRM, and there are some wonderful things that come out of aviation, but in the majority it is a very draconian business, and it's still run by old farts like me that really should have a wake-up call and do things in a more modern manner.
No, I wouldn't put you in that category. But I know what you're saying, because there's a lot of people that they keep spouting about the same old things. I'm just trying to think now whether my son and some of the people I know be saying the same thing about me. But I like to think anything that's new that makes sense, you should bring it in as quick as possible. And anybody that's good enough is old enough, and anybody that is able to make a difference, let them go, because it's so important to keep stretching and growing. And somebody said to me the other day, if you get in with somebody who keeps pushing you, it's a little bit like working in a greenhouse. You sweat a lot, but you grow very quickly. And I think the more people that get an opportunity now, especially with fresh ideas and innovative, and digital transformation, it's fantastic, especially if it makes things faster, more transparent, and adds the quality that's necessary. Now, Dustin, let me ask you something. Right, so you were heading up fantastic organization, Hangar 8 PLC, and you said about the value that it was. Now, most people would think to themselves, this is fantastic. What a great day. Every day you get up, there you are, head of a huge organization, really successful. Why then would you want to go and do something else and get something kicking off whilst you're still running that particular business?
Well, I think that the important thing in growing any business is understanding your own skill set, and also your lifestyle choices. I thoroughly enjoyed growing a management business that did it very differently to everybody else at the time. We grew at the time what was at one point one of the second largest AOC holders in the UK that nobody had ever heard of. And what I enjoyed about that was doing everything differently, implementing it differently, and proving that something could be done on scale in that industry with transparency, with cost savings, and grow it to a point. My skill set is not sitting in that ivory tower, pushing a spreadsheet around, answering the telephone, and having no contact with my staff. At that point, it's time to hand over to somebody else. And historically, I've always sold my businesses when they've got to that size, or are heading to that kind of platform. What I love about Volare is that I walk into my offices, which are in one of our hangars at Oxford Airport. I have a big glass window that looks out onto a mountain of airplanes and helicopters. I go and interfere with all of my very highly qualified staff who tell me to get lost and stick myself back in my office. But I now work in an environment which is basically a huge boys' toy shop, full of private jets, helicopters, and some of my vintage aircraft. So it's not the worst working environment to go to, and it probably reflects my character much better, which is to be very hands-on.
Oh, fantastic. That's a breath of fresh air, because like you say, most people, when they get to that level, you very seldom see them with their feet on the ground and interacting with the people who know exactly what's going on at the base of the business. So no, fair play to you. So now, as far as you're concerned and Volare's journey so far, so are you happy where you are now, and what do you see being the next steps? Because obviously this pandemic now has changed everything in private aviation. It's brought it to people's attention. People are pushing themselves now because they see it's achievable, and whether it's from a business perspective and efficiencies, and even the FBOs now are coming into their own, because they're a great platform now for meetings, because people are getting fed up of Zoom and Teams and everything, albeit it's very effective, but people need to start seeing each other again.
I think the stepping stone that this pandemic has given is a very interesting one. So we've seen a lot of people come into private aviation that have never chartered before, have never owned before, and have always been able to afford it. I think there's an element of Britishism in that, which is British people generally don't like to be seen to be successful. If you drive your Ferrari around in Italy, everyone comes out and says what a beautiful car it is. If you park it in London, someone keys it. There's a lot of marketplace within the UK that can afford to use these products that haven't, because of that reason. I think the second element is perception in businesses, particularly the banking sector and stuff, who feel they can't be seen to be using these. And now suddenly what we've done is tick a box that says, well, it is acceptable because it saves lives. It means that people can actually travel to places that you cannot go to on an airline. It makes me feel safe. I can put my family on that, and I can go on a holiday, which I may not have had for 2 years. If you can afford it, it is an excellent means of transportation. And that's without visiting the fact that any of the elements that make it really popular, which is that you can't buy more time. You only have a set time on this earth. And if you can do 4 times as many things because you're in a helicopter for the day, or go and see 3 more different customers, it is a staggeringly powerful business tool. And whether you use that to facilitate the fact that you can go and do a whole day's business and then still get back at 4 o'clock to pick your kids up from school, or whether you use it to grow your business. I mean, we're on Zoom now. We can't be together today, but I think Zoom is a wonderful platform for maintaining business, but you can't grow your business without meeting people. And a private jet or a helicopter allows you to meet 4 times as many people in a day than driving around in a car does, or using an airline. That leverage that it's now given the industry, where it says, I used to be able to use a business class ticket or EasyJet to get from A to B, and the flight went every hour. doesn't exist, and even when it does exist, they might change it tomorrow because somebody will change the list. A business jet and a helicopter, you can do that, and people have now got to do it if they want to travel, and B, it gives them a legitimate excuse to defend any image issues that they may have within their industry for using it. And, you can't shout louder than my staff won't go because they don't want to get on an airliner, but they will all fly in the same bubble as me to go somewhere for the day and then come back again. So, it's transformed the perception of business jet aviation. I think, it's always going to attract a bit of bad press about it being elitist, and, the social media element of it, of everybody taking pictures of themselves hopping on holiday when other people couldn't. Not perfect, but in the majority, 99% of the users are using them because it is the only way of getting around and it makes them feel safe. So I think that element has been wonderful about it. I think there are people that have got into ownership of these types of aircraft and helicopters without proper advice. And they'll find that they are very expensive, or more expensive than they thought they were. And I would say to anybody buying an aircraft, the best thing you can do is make sure you're surrounded by people that know what they're doing. There's lots of ways of getting into this marketplace, but if you can find somebody that can maintain them, has owned them, and knows how to operate them, and get some really good advice, that is beyond a doubt the platform to get into. And I think going forward, at the moment, there's virtually no used aeroplanes of any quality whatsoever on the open market. They are all sold. The values have all gone up. Most of the stuff that is available is not great, or if it is great, it will be on the market for less than 30 days at the moment. And I think aviation, no matter which part you're in, is always cyclical. So we will see this go like this, I would think, for the next year or two, maybe a bit more while the manufacturers catch up. And there may be an element of people falling away after the next year because it's too expensive for them. But I think it's here to stay, and I think that it's here to stay for many years at least. I can't see the dynamic changing in the next 2 to 3. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think it's funny what you were saying there about culture and acceptance, and far too often people are a little bit shy or ashamed of success. And with that success, comes other people's opportunities. I've never seen a poor man employ another. So it's it's important that people are successful, because then it gives other people a chance to do things, and whereby they accept legacy airlines to a degree, albeit there's a lot of carbon footprint pressure now. But when it comes then to private aviation, they don't realise there's a huge proportion of our industry in support services around that private aviation, and they've all got responsibilities. So I think if it becomes a little bit more acceptable, and if the PR is done correctly, I think it's just going to go from strength to strength, because I've got a couple of small airports close to me, and I'm just thinking to myself, I could be at one of them in 6 or 7 minutes, and I could be away somewhere, rather than sometimes it can take me over an hour on the M25 to get into Heathrow, or even longer down to Gatwick. And then you've got to go through more queues. You've got to go through everything else, obviously, in the days that were. And I think people are still a little bit fearful of getting back into these crowds.
Yeah. No, I look, I think, having walked through Corfu Airport 3 days ago, and seen, the best part of 5,000 people all shoved into a room that's at 35 degrees C, you can certainly sit there and justify why somebody would want to get off an aeroplane and walk through a VIP terminal and have no touch points whatsoever with anybody outside of their normal environment. That is always going to be a wonderful place to be. And if you can facilitate that for people, and get them traveling again, and get business back particularly into the UK, I think that will be transformational. We need to get an element of normality back, and we can't lose our edge in the UK by waiting for and stopping anybody coming here. We need to get on with it, and I think that's very important. I think that the pandemic has allowed people, particularly in the UK, because I think they are more image conscious than a lot of other places, or certainly find private aviation a bit more in your face than Americans, for example, who just see it as a means of transportation, or Africans that can only use it as a means of transportation. Yeah. Its perception is different around here. It's elitist, and if we can take an edge off that, I think that would make a huge impression and improvement in the industry. And I think probably the remaining element for removal on that is the industry needs to do more to become more carbon neutral and do more for the environment. It's an incredibly difficult industry to tackle those things. I'm not convinced that electric planes are going to be around in the next few years. But if we can get to a point where we're using better fuels, have decent carbon offset plans that people really believe are actually the money's going to the right place and that the government are doing the right things with it, I think perception from that side that we're doing the right thing would make a massive difference.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And one of the things that everybody says, well, why don't you have all electric equipment at every single airport? But most of the large airports haven't got the surge capacity or the energy levels or the facilities to actually do it, even if they wanted to. So when people are talking about sustainability, they still have to remember, it's all about planet, people, but it's also about profit, because if you haven't got the money to do it, it's not going to get done. It's a very difficult situation, especially at dinner parties where people are saying one thing and then you're better off just keeping quiet. But the other thing I wanted to ask you is, are you seeing a change in people's habits now on the private aviation side, whereby they might combine it with a more exclusive holiday or vacation site, that's a little bit more private or remote, and then they're going for longer periods of time, so they see that extra money as a worthwhile expense?
I think there's an element of that. I think it's probably more about diversity. So if you can afford to own and run one of these aircraft, you're probably running a relatively big organization. And I think what a lot of people have done during this setup is move themselves and their families around to different countries in order that they can take their base and operate through their other bases. So rather than being tied down in the UK during a full lockdown, they may have taken themselves elsewhere so they can continue to operate their businesses and fly in and out of whichever countries. And if you watch this merry-go-round of maps where various countries have gone up, down, if you're sophisticated, and most businesses are sophisticated that can afford these types of aircraft, you're able to position yourself and your team in different countries and still move around legally and safely, just by making sure you're in the right place at the right time. And we've seen a huge amount of that. And to be honest, the only way you can do that is with your own aircraft.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now, as far as your organisation, and I was looking on the website about My Heli and about the convenience and the ease at which you can do that. And obviously in the past, I remember what's his name? Ex-Queen Park Rangers and Tottenham player, Des Ferdinand.
Yeah.
Des or Les, I can't remember. Les Ferdinand, I think it was. I remember reading an article years and years ago about he took his helicopter license and he used a helicopter, and it was, whoa, blimey. And I've been in them a few times and going way back to the Gatwick London connection as well. But the smaller ones, I mean, that's an incredibly good option as well, isn't it? Especially for here on land.
I mean, look, in England, helicopters are transformationally flexible. So, I mean, I live in Oxfordshire. I could take my helicopter from my back garden and at 8 o'clock in the morning, zoom off to inspect a building site in Stroud, which is 10 minutes away from me by helicopter, an hour and a half by car. I can then hop in that after my meeting, go and see one of my aviation supply companies in Sussex, which would be about another 3-hour drive from Stroud, which I can do in 25 minutes in my helicopter. Chat to my supply chain there, have a lunch meeting in London, which would take me another 12 minutes to get to, which if I was to drive would be another 2.5 hours. Have my lunch meeting, leave Battersea and be in Woburn to go and see my tailor for a fitting for an hour, which would take me another 3 hours to drive, but is 20-minute flight. and then be back at home for 4 o'clock to hop into Oxford and pick my kids up. So I could spend 4 days in the car, or I could see everybody I needed to do between 9 o'clock and 4 o'clock and be done.
Hey, that's not bad. A day in the life of Dustin. I wouldn't mind being your number 2. Fantastic. Hey, see my tailor. Brilliant. Now, as far as yourselves and moving for the future, and you said about the different types of people coming in. I always remember a few friends who bought themselves boats. And they always joked that the 2 best days was the first day that you buy it and the second day when you sell it. How does that differ as an aircraft owner?
My small experience in the boats, I would thoroughly agree with that. But from an aviation perspective, I think if you walk in with your eyes open, the cost of running an aircraft or a helicopter are fairly linear. So as long as you know what you're doing when you go in, depreciation is very predictable. It's not vast in the if you buy the right thing in the right space of time. I don't think it's something that should be scary. It's only scary if you've wandered into it without being educated. If you take a slice and time ago, our biggest sellers are probably Challengers and Hawkers. They are very, very consistent in operating costs and maintenance. That most of the stuff nowadays is covered in programs. The supply chain for manufacturers' parts is pretty well known. You don't get ugly surprises. What you get is lack of education. And I think, once again, if you choose a professional operator, you get the right survey done on your aircraft and the right advice when you walk in, the risk is not problematic. And, we're happy to sell somebody an airplane in the UK and then guarantee the cost of maintenance for 12 months, for example. So you can iron out all of those sort of things very quickly. It shouldn't be scary like boats.
Okay. So you've given some hot tips there. If you were, if somebody that you knew quite well, and they said, right, Dustin, I need 4 or 5 really key points that I've got to get my ducks in a row. What would those 4 or 5 points you would say to him straight away? Even if you just knew him socially, you weren't sure what the bank balance was like. What would be the 5 points you would say, this is what you need to do?
If you're thinking about buying an airplane, go and talk to 2 or 3 operators about what they cost, what they charge, and what they know. Ideally, choose an operator that has access to or is involved intimately with a maintenance facility, and then find a broker that you trust to give you great advice. If you can get those 3 things together, you're well away. I would always recommend you go and retain and pay somebody to go and find you an airplane. Unfortunately, once again, our industry doesn't do itself any favors in that. It makes brokers run around, often unpaid by the seller and unpaid by the buyer, having to try and squeeze something out in the middle of the deal. In no other industry I know would find that acceptable. Even estate agents have contracts, by retaining somebody and giving them a professional obligation to serve you well, and find somebody that can serve you well, I think you'll save yourself a huge amount of money. And often the best way of finding those people is go and speak to somebody else that owns an airplane. They'll at least give you 10 people who you shouldn't go anywhere near, and hopefully two that are well worth talking to.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Good. That's good advice. Now, as far as being a positive disruptor yourself, and you've given a little window into the optimistic future for the next few years. But if you were to wake up one day and say, right, now I need to change things again, what would you think are the areas that you'd like to change now with private aviation, say over the next 10 years?
But my big focus for next business at the moment is working on a method of improving environmental impact of corporate aviation, and it's a subject that I find very interesting. I think it's probably the most transformational for making it a more socially acceptable activity. And I think that, just talk about the flooding and the issues you've had today. I don't believe for a second anyone can say that we haven't got some form of climate change going on. What the causes are and whether aviation has even a minor impact on that, we could argue till the cows come home. But in every instance, every little helps. And I think that if we can do something to make people feel that the environmental impact of what they're doing, whether they're buying one off me and we sell it to you with a carbon neutral footprint for the first 2 years, or whether you're coming to me to operate and for every hour you fly, we're able to offset the full carbon footprint of the aircraft. I think that's a very important issue going forward. We need to show sustainability. We touched on it earlier. One of my biggest gripes with electrical anything is that that there is no research and no acceptability in how we dig this stuff out the ground and what pain we inflict on the African continents by how we acquire these batteries, and there's no plan for getting rid of them, and most of them will never produce as much electricity in their life as it takes to build one. So I think there's a very, very narrow-minded view on what people see as being environmentally friendly. And I feel that our industry has not done a great job of dealing with it, because a lot of businesses in our industry are very short term when it comes to doing this sort of stuff. That they win and lose and fall and rise all the time. So sustainability is a long term thing, and that's my real interest at the moment. I think there's a huge area for disruption in that.
Don't you think there needs to be a better degree of education, awareness, common sense, and logic, but also real honest facts about sustainability? Because you listen. I listen to like my kids and the younger generation. They're saying to me, "Oh, you should get an electric car. You should get a Tesla. You should get this. You should get that." But like you just said there, people don't even realise sometimes, where the actual raw materials come from, and what does that do from where it's coming. And the biggest thing of all is, where's this mountain of batteries going to go, and how are they going to be disposed correctly and and efficiently? And I just think the education level and the awareness, rather than somebody catching on to something that's trendy and they're listening to, that's a huge area that needs to be addressed.
I agree with you. I mean, the difficulty with all of these things is, we're reliant on big business to be honest, which they are not always. Marketing and social media these days is so powerful. It's driven by the people with the biggest budget, or the influencers, who are also driven by being paid. So actually putting anything that's accurate and pragmatic into the public domain in any volume is incredibly difficult. So you are then reliant on something that you mentioned called common sense, which isn't common, and people's own practical research ability. But the reality is that we were told that diesel cars were the way forward. We've now been told that diesel cars can't go into any of our cities. We now need electric cars, and at some point somebody will actually, in the majority, work out that there's nowhere to put the batteries once they're all dead, and they're not biodegradable, and we've got to bury them. So it's cyclical, and unfortunately the technology and industry is way ahead of legislation. It always has been, and as much as it's disappointing, I think all we can do is take our elements, and in this particular case, the one that I like is to try. I can't see jet fuel being replaced by biofuel in any volume in a hurry. It will become more and more available, but what we can do is make sure that all the money that's being spent on using these private jets and carbon offsets, for example, are actually put to some real use. And all the airlines and business jets as of next year will be paying carbon charges. At the moment, those carbon charges are collected by the UK government and Brussels, and are sat in a bank account and spent on nothing. And nobody's even asked what they're going to be spent on. Exactly. So we're being taxed for something that everybody believes is to do with the environment, but actually none of it's being spent on the environment. So there's a huge catch up to be had here. It's not right the way in which the industry has been dealing with it, and battery powered aircraft. As much as they will have a niche area, are definitely not going to do anything to improve the environment around us.
No, I was talking to somebody the other day about hybrid cars and small ranges on the charge, but the fact that they don't even get fully charged up, so they're actually carrying around a very heavy battery, which is probably doing more negative impact than it was positive. So I mean, there's a lot of misunderstanding. Now I've got a question I'd like to end with. So obviously Volare, all right, and fair play, you're brilliant. You've said what you would do. Now, big question: why would somebody go to Volare? What are the unique selling points? What do you think is so different and so special? Apart from, I've really understood now, those 4 lads that go and do the survey of an aircraft, they're a valuable team, I would imagine. I would imagine you smile every day when you see the 4 of them so that they continue to stay with you.
I have an absolutely brilliant team. Most of them have been with me for a very long time. I wouldn't have a business without them. They're fantastic, and they're all as enthusiastic about the industry as I am. But I think the overriding reason to come to us to even just to look and understand about aviation, you don't need to buy from me. It is that we are a one-stop shop. There are no other businesses that do everything in-house that we do. You can come here and understand about operating the airplane, buying one, choose how to paint it, do the interior. Our crew will talk to you about flying it. You can see everything on a completely transparent basis. You can touch the airplane before you buy it. You can have a go in it, and you can take it away fully operational the next day. There's nobody else that can do that. And we have effectively a car showroom that you can come and look at these things in. The stock, we own it, and you can come and buy it. And that just doesn't happen in our industry.
Fantastic. Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. And my eyesight isn't what it used to be. And on your screen, it's got Dustin/Amy, but from where I'm sitting, it looks like Dustin's army. So I can believe that you've got a good solid unit behind you. And I wish you great success. And it's great to meet people like yourself, very down to earth, very forthright, very clear, and very open. I don't think there's anything better. And good luck with everything that you do, Dustin. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Chris, it's been wonderful that you put up with me. I hope I haven't bored you to death, but
not at all.
And hopefully we'll see each other in person sometime soon.
I would love to. Even if it's just to come to, I think you said Holborn, to the tailors. I'd be happy to go there.
I'll take you there if you need a new suit. I highly recommend him.
Yeah, mind you, that's something that none of us have worn for a long time.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not a good investment at the moment, and not a trip I've done recently. That's for sure.
I can imagine. Take care, sir. Absolute pleasure. Thanks.
Cheers, Chris. Take care.